Hi, I'm Monica O. Montgomery Nyathi. I am the curator of the Pilgrimage Project and the founding director of Museum of Impact. The Pilgrimage Project is an imaginarium of the roots and wings of freedom in a time of jeopardy for Black people. We're looking at the ways that Black people found freedom in the face of oppression, namely the transatlantic slave trade and being enslaved on plantations. There is the narrative of Harriet Tubman and all she did to bring people through the Underground Railroad, but we want to look at individual actors and pairs and couples and families that journeyed to freedom on their own, that said we can't take it anymore and we're leaving, and the ways that they worked, the ways that they walked and moved through the world, determined to find freedom and having joy in that journey. We have 4 parts to the imagery that accompanies the Pilgrimage Project. The initial fleeing, showing people leaving spaces that they just can't take anymore, that are brutal and entrenched in white supremacy and violence. Showing the traversing, how they journeyed through the countryside, the terrains and the roads, how they had to be outdoorsmen and outdoorswomen to figure out how to navigate through spaces to remain undetected. Camping, having a moment of rest, having a moment of respite in the middle of this journeying, this fight for freedom, understanding sometimes they had to set up camp and take a moment to assess, and finally settling, finding the freedom colony and the space where they could live free, their families could live free, and no longer were in bondage. The 3 freedom colonies that we are looking at in this particular series of the Pilgrimage Project is the Woodlawn Mansion in Fairfax County, Alexandria, Virginia, which at one point was a plantation that had enslaved Africans on it, but later on was converted through a social experiment that the Quakers did to make sure that Black people could live free, could work the land, and be paid for their labor. It was a radical social experiment at the time, but really showed the ways that people could be in community, espousing those Quaker values and taking away those chains of slavery that were still remaining. Also, Weeksville, Brooklyn. It was a section in Brooklyn that was a free Black community founded by James Weeks, where he envisioned everyone coming, having land, having a house, and thereby gaining the right to vote. It was a political experiment as well as a haven for society for Black people coming from other places they had been terrorized, and Weeksville lasted for hundreds of years. And today is being memorialized, that history of Weeksville, through the Weeksville Heritage Center. And lastly, contraband camps. Once enslaved Africans, free Africans, anyone crossed the Mason-Dixon line, it was assumed that you were in a free territory. The government had to honor that. And so people that were crossing those lines into Washington, D.C. knew that they were coming to freedom, but they didn't have anything set up. There was no person that was looking out for them, live here, work here, settle here. So they just made makeshift tents, camps on the side of the road, often near where Civil War sites were happening and near forts. They would camp in mass tent cities and find ways to hold each other and help each other through the transition. These 3 spaces represent hundreds of freedom colonies around North America and beyond, where Black people went to live and to find a better way. And I think it's important to realize that there is a lack of artifacts, there's a lack of history, there's a lack of memorabilia around the journeys and the decision-making that Black people did to get free. So we've created a new visual dialect using photography from William Ellis and Kay Hickman, showing them as actors on the journey. This is what a freedom journey may have looked like. This is what escaping slavery may have looked like. This is what it looked like to set up in a new space and start a new life. It doesn't exist, and so we've created it. And I also want to add that what has inspired this project is the blood memory of people throughout the African diaspora and the nature of ancestry and family trees. As part of this commission project, when I went to the Woodlawn Mansion and looked at their archives, the family of George Washington, with which his granddaughter owned that mansion, was huge. And they have a family tree that literally spans several feet. Hundreds of people, decades and generations and centuries of knowing their family, their positioning and their privilege. I think that family trees is a privilege, and that many African Americans, African diasporans don't have that birthright, don't have that luxury of knowing generations back. So we want to envision what would a family tree look like, and we've written poetry and we've created imagery, and we're creating emotionally resonant spaces to imagine the futures our ancestors had in mind for us. Find out more at www.museumofimpact.org/pilgrimage.